Well, let's return to our top story this morning, the arrival of the first migrants on the government's accommodation barge in Dorset. The government's also announced a new task force to identify unscrupulous lawyers after reports that false asylum claims are being submitted for a fee. The Justice Secretary, Alex Chalk, joins me in the studio now. Thanks very much for coming in. A letter was seen by Sky News yesterday which shows that asylum seekers who didn't get on the barge yesterday must board today or face having their government support cancelled. Now, a lot of these people may well have legitimate reasons to claim asylum. Are you breaking your legal responsibility to these refugees by threatening them with this?
Well, look, those who object to going on the barge can seek legal advice and try to resist it in the normal way, and we will have those arguments played out in an independent court. That's absolutely right. But look, the point about the barge...
But you're saying to them, not that it will go to a court, that if they don't get on it, they're out.
Well, look, the point about that is the British people would rightly expect, of course, people coming to our country would have basically safe and decent accommodation. What they don't expect is that we're spending £6 million a day on four-star hotel accommodation. So this is about fairness. Yes, of course, fairness to migrants, but also fairness to the British people. And we are very clear that it is safe and it is reasonable that people should be provided with acceptable accommodation, but not accommodation necessarily which goes beyond that, which costs huge amounts of money. Because £6 million a day, billions of pounds a year, that's money which then can't be spent on other priorities for the British people, whether it's the NHS or whether it's schools and so on. So, look, we are absolutely clear that people who arrive in our country illegally, for example, we will do what is absolutely right and the appropriate standards will be applied. But we won't go beyond that and spend money which, frankly, has to be borrowed in any event and is not the priorities of the British people.
But in terms of the finances, I mean, the BBC Stockholm is a tiny drop in the ocean, isn't it? You talk about the 6 million, but only 1% of those who are currently paying for hotels could be housed in the BBC Stockholm. So it's a solution, but it's a very tiny, it's a minor one, isn't it?
That's right, and it is part of the solution. That's why, you know, your listeners will be aware that we're considering all sorts of disused army bases. We want to consider what accommodation is out there which will take the strain off the taxpayer that is currently spending a huge amount of money per day. So we want to bring that number in expensive hotel accommodation down. The BBC Stockholm is part of it, but it's not the complete solution. But it also sends a message as well that the British people will be fair, of course will be fair, but we're also going to be fair to the British people as well. And I think that's the right balance to strike.
But the government needs 100 more barges, doesn't it, if it wants to get rid of this £6 million hotel bill?
Right, so the Home Office will consider what other barge accommodation, but I do want to stress the point, it's not purely about barges, and as I say, your listeners will have heard about other disused army bases and other facilities that are available as well. So a huge amount of work is taking place to see what other alternative, cheaper, more cost-efficient and, frankly, more proportionate accommodation is available. We cannot have, in perpetuity, people staying in four-star accommodation, because that is money, as I say, which isn't going into the wider community. It's not disproportionate and it's not fair.
You're today announcing a crackdown on lawyers who encourage migrants to make false claims. How will this work in practice?
Right, so this is a professional enablers task force to go after the minority of lawyers. And I want to stress as a minority of lawyers, the overwhelming majority do an extremely important and professional job. You know, our legal sector is the second biggest in the world and it's something of which we can be rightly proud. But where there is that small minority who abuse their position, who betray their profession, frankly, who make up stories, who lie or otherwise abuse the process in order to support clients, well, we are ramping up our ability to do so, first of all, by helping to train Home Office caseworkers who often see this stuff to identify it more clearly, also to ensure that they are referring it to the correct body within the ecosystem of enforcement that exists, but also this, to ensure that they support those prosecutions with relevant and admissible evidence to ensure that people can be brought to justice.
It's not new, though, is it? Boris Johnson's Nationality and Borders Act included this, and the Home Office says this task force has been up and running for the past few months. So why are you making this announcement today, making it seem like it's a new thing, when it's actually something that's already been happening?
No, not quite true. No, it is a new thing. So the actual Enablers Task Force is a whole step change in approach within the Home Office. So previously you had a situation where caseworkers might see what they've thought of was suspicious, right? So prima facie evidence of illegality. What we're doing is helping to train them to identify that more clearly. Second, to ensure that you can refer it to the right agency, because there are so many agencies that are acting in this area. You've got the NCA, of course, you've got the police, but also you've got the Office of the Immigration Services Commissioner, you've got the Solicitors Regulatory Authority, Solicitors Disciplinary Tribunal. So it's assisting those caseworkers who should you refer this to, but then also how do you go about preparing and packaging evidence which could then be admissible and used to bring prosecutions or indeed other disciplinary matters. So look, it is new, it is a step change, and it's about galvanising and really improving our efforts to crack down on illegality.
But it's using existing structures, it's not creating something new.
Well, it's true, there are existing structures, and I mentioned some of these other agencies, but the critically important is to ensure that you coordinate those so they are more than the sum of their parts. Because you can have a situation which might appear to be fragmented, in the sense that you would have the NCA prosecuting, investigating matters and the CPS. If you improve how these things are coordinated, that makes a big difference. Second, if you ensure that caseworkers are providing the critical evidence, in other words, seizing material, ensuring that it is packaged in the right way, that it is provided to the correct agency, you can see a step change in the effectiveness of those organisations in going after wrongdoing. And we're absolutely clear we want to crack down, not, by the way, because we don't think lawyers do a good job. The overwhelming majority do an exceptionally important role. And as I say, it's a sector of which we are hugely proud as a nation. But the tiny minority let the side down, and it's right, we should go after them.
If it's a tiny minority, why is the government investing time and energy on it? I mean, shouldn't the real problem with migration seems to be the enormous backlog? Shouldn't that be the government's focus?
It's because that tiny minority do enormously important and serious harm. Because every time they come up with a fraudulent story which leads to that person staying in the country, that could be someone who has absolutely no right to be here. That could be somebody about whom the nation has a serious security concern, for example. So it is extremely serious, and it's also very corrosive for trust in lawyers as a whole. So yes, it might be a small minority, but the impact it has is disproportionately serious. And if we want to preserve our reputation, I was in Japan recently, the British legal system has an extraordinarily high reputation. If we want to preserve that, our international counterparts and us as a nation would expect us to come down hard on those bad actors.
As Justice Secretary, it's great to have you here, can I ask you about the Andrew Malkinson?
Yes, appalling case.
GMP's already apologised for their failings in the case. Now it's been revealed by Lord Justice Holyrood in their long ruling that they also actively failed to disclose evidence. So they've apologised again today. The IOPC is investigating. For this man, it's not enough, is it? What sanctions should be taken against
So I'm a barrister by background, prosecuted in the courts, and to hear about a miscarriage of justice like this just makes my blood run cold. It's absolutely appalling. The British people are entitled to expect that, yes, people are prosecuted, but they are prosecuted fairly. And so I was really shocked to read about what sounds like a disclosure failure, which in plain English means where material that is held by the prosecution, which ought to have been provided to the defence, because actually it shows that...
So what should be done about it?
Well, look, I mean, there's a procedure which is taking place. The IOPC is considering that. And if there has been a disclosure failure, then you say an apology might not be enough. It may well not be enough, but that will be a matter for Mr Malkinson to decide whether he wants to proceed. What I can say is that where there is a miscarriage of justice, as there has been in this case, is there is a scheme which is available to provide a measure of compensation to those individuals, and that's well understood.
But it's about stopping it happening again, isn't it? And he said the Criminal Cases Review Commission, despite being asked, didn't investigate. That is their job, isn't it? Why did they not do it? And is it fit for purpose if it doesn't investigate cases like this?
Well, it's really important to consider. So what happens when you're convicted? Then you can make an application for leave to appeal from the court. The Court of Appeal can consider your conviction, decide whether it's safe. So that takes place anyway. And then potentially you can put your case before the Criminal Cases Review
But here
Commission.
They were asked to, and they didn't investigate, and it took an independent charity to uncover this evidence.
And look, absolutely. The thing to be mindful of is that if, and this is why the IOPC needs to do its work, if the situation was that the police in the first place had not revealed the critical piece of evidence, then whatever the CCRC did, they themselves would not have been aware of it.
But if they did not even ask for it in the first place, how would they have known that?
Because if they didn't know it existed. Because I think, and we've got to be careful because we don't know all the facts of this, but the report that I've read tends to suggest that there was really salient material, a photograph about injuries and so on. And if that was potentially exculpatory, in other words, it would have pointed away from him being the person who did it, if that was not disclosed, then the Court of Appeal wouldn't have been aware of it and the CCRC wouldn't have been aware of it. So, look, what I think we need to do is we need to take it in stages, get to the bottom of what happened, but the first thing to work out is, did the police do their job? And if they didn't, then that may well have been what led to injustices down the track.
OK, Alex Chalk, Justice Secretary, thank you very much.